Hello and welcome to episode 2 of TO Battle Talk. My name is Chris. I am here with...
Matt.
Matt is here. We're here. We're about 4.5 beers in at this stage. Things are good. We are ready to talk about battle rap. We're going to talk today about the controversies over what happened at Don't Flop's 5th birthday weekend. We've been following them closely. I think I've been following them more closely than you have.
I've been looking at things, maybe not as closely as you have. I think the major thing that has stuck out for me is that I still don't fully have a handle on what exactly happened, and maybe that's where my confusion is coming from.
Right. I think part of the problem with...
is that there's no pay-per-view.
Well, there's a few problems. One of the problems is there's no pay-per-view, so we can't actually see the stuff for ourselves. The other problem is very few people were actually live tweeting this event. I saw very few bars quoted. I saw a few different recaps on RMBVA, and the other issue that I was initially referring to is the problem that the forums were all down for a short time in the last few days. RMBVA has been down. OTBVA has been down for about a week and a half. There were some server issues. RMBVA has been, from one account, under attack, from what I've heard. And then the Don't Flop forum was down after day one, has been down until today, which is Tuesday. So from Saturday until Tuesday it was down. So there was no real place for you to talk about this stuff other than in fragmented Twitter conversations, I guess Facebook conversations that I'm not necessarily a party to because I don't have that many Don't Flop friends on Facebook. But yeah, so there's been a lot of smokescreen, a lot of confusion over what's been going on. There actually has been some footage dropped, the bootleggiest of bootlegs, of some guy.
Really?
Yeah. Some guy at the event on his phone 3 rows back. I've seen the footage of the beer spilled on clips and his reaction. I've seen the footage of what was the other controversy? Oh, Pesci getting sour about...
Did Pesci spill his drink on some people?
He apparently poured his
sports
drink
it's
whatever.
Gatorade, Powerade.
Unconfirmed at this stage.
Blue Powerade.
So I've seen that, and then I have not seen the line that I think was the most controversial line of the event, which was calling out organic, I guess allegedly calling out organic. I've seen several different takes on what exactly was said, what exactly was meant by it, how serious it was. The closest... just tell me what have you heard so far about that line as I look for the quote.
Well, I would say unanimously people seem to be quoting "suck my dick" as the closer. There may be a veiled reference to King Fly. I've heard maybe there was a line about fly in it, but that could be very misinterpreted. Yeah. Who knows?
And the funny thing about this is we are so far from the original source that I don't know if or Banalam or whoever even said this is calling out King Fly or is calling out a fly that was buzzing around that. We are so far removed from the truth right now that it's ridiculous. So just take that into account, that we are just trying to piece together what actually happened at this event. I've spoken to several different people from both Don't Flop staff, from King of the Dot people who were there, from fans who were there. I've tried to piece together exactly what has happened. Most people have refused to comment on it, beyond saying, oh, it's all in good fun. It's all part of the sport. It's all in the bars. It's friendly competition. I think that's a possibility. I have pulled up the closest thing that I've seen to a full setup and punchline here. I'm going to read it out loud. this is from someone on RMBVA who claims to have been there. Their account of the content was quite almost opposite from some of the other accounts in terms of who won, who did well, who did poorly. So we don't know if that's true or not. However, I did post this quote saying, is this the right thing? And I had, I think 2 people respond to me saying that's about what he said. So here's the line. I'll admit organic gets me flustered. And then in brackets, I forget wasn't offensive. Calls himself a president, that pretentious fucker. I'd rather call myself a fucking battle setter-upper. Something, something, I forget. Something, something, run my ship. But until he fires the guy who pulled that subscribe shit, I've got 3 words for King of the Dot. Suck my dick. So it was those last 3 words that caught fire over Twitter over the weekend. I think there were also claims of bad business, which strikes me as a kind of spin on Sharon's line against DNA at World Domination 4, saying the only reason you're here is because Summer Madness 3 is a flop, or Smack does bad business and Summer Madness 3 is a flop, which set the crowd off. And which, didn't really cause the same firestorm necessarily that Ur's lines seem to have.
I think part of the reason for that is that people were almost expecting that, because going into the event, there was already a lot of talk like SM3 is going to suck, like there's no Lux. I can't remember the exact timing. I don't know if I think Smack revealed the card on Instagram.
Yes.
Like he really purposely downplayed the card. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if he did that, what the timing of that was.
Probably a few weeks before.
A little bit before World Domination. But by then, a lot of people were kind of like, oh, this is not going to live up to it, because everyone wanted to see Lux again, right?
Yeah.
And that card, I mean, a lot of it didn't go down in the end and everything didn't work out, but the card wasn't actually that bad for SM3. It just didn't have a couple of the big names that everyone had been hoping for.
Right.
And I think, there were a couple decisions that were made by URL that people didn't love, and it wasn't that shocking, really, when people were calling out URL. Mm-hmm. So even though at the venue we're like, oh my god, listen to such and such go in on Smack or the League or random battlers, at the same time, like,
it was part of the zeitgeist, though. Like,
yeah,
it was definitely like
it was capturing sort of the mood on
mm-hmm.
On Twitter or on the forums or something like that. Whereas, like, I feel like in the past year, like, KOTD certainly gets people critiquing it at all times. If you go on the forums, you're always going to find someone who is saying, "Hey, I don't agree with this" or whatever. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, I would say that most people think that it's on upward trajectory. The League. They've built up the Fresh Coast into something that's become pretty successful. They brought back Battle of the Bay. World Dom was pretty successful as well. So to have a League, end around saying "suck my dick" to the founder of the other league, I think just took people aback, which is why it's garnered so much reaction.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think the other thing that is different here is that it wasn't of the I guess 3 major call-outs at World Dom against URL. It was Real Deal calling out Chilla Jones. It was Charlie Clips calling out Smack, and then it was Sharon calling out Don DeMarco, Smack battlers in general,
yes,
and Smack himself. So I think that the difference there is that you've got as the figurehead, because I see as the founder, the head, the president, the spokesperson.
He's the face of Don't Flop.
The face of Don't Flop. So
and he's arguably, even though he doesn't battle anymore, the best British battler.
Mm.
If you look at his resume, like, he's not only the founder, but also the best British battler maybe of all time.
Right. the leader as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So to have him saying, to have him calling out another league, I think is different than having battlers from your, like if it was, if C Major had called out, anybody, or if like
Shuffle T has a hilarious bar about Nameless.
Right.
It's like people are like, fuck it.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't cause that same controversy as when you, like, if Organic was out there saying anything, or I'd have to watch back Organic's reactions during like Sharon's second round, for example. My impression
I could be wrong about this. But when things like that get mentioned, other leagues, especially if it's in a negative light, like making fun of URL or some battler that primarily battles there, Organic doesn't really react, or even just sort of like puts his head down. He doesn't like revel in the misfortune of another league or making fun of another league or anything like that. He's not down with that whatsoever. But again, like, I'd have to look back at the tape, especially from the stuff this past summer.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't think...
Who had the line, King of the Dot is shitting on Grind Time now? That's such a famous line, but I can't remember the battle or who said it. But it was like this moment where some
there's certainly a lot of stuff against Grind Time, and I wouldn't be surprised if Organic laughs more at that stuff. Because it's basically a defunct league at this point. I remember, there's a ton of stuff about Grind Time, but Bender said to Sid Vicious, like, they told me to put Grind Time in the ground, I'd have to dig it out of the ground first, or something like that. They told me to put a nail in Grind Time's coffin, but I'd have to dig it out of the ground first. Okay.
Yeah.
He probably laughs at stuff like that, right? Because it's just like, because he was never really like, Grind Time's kind of over, like.
But there was a time, really... in King of the Dot's ascent, they were the little guy and Grind Time was the big guy.
Yeah.
And there was a definite reversal of fortunes there, and I almost think it was like Lavos who said something about it.
I'm sure although Lavos, as we know, is battled within the past year on Grind Time. I think. I think. Anyway, I could be wrong.
Or 30 other
Grind Time Now.
Yeah,
I think is the correct name for the league.
So this is what allegedly was said. Like I say, I've tweeted at and then several other like staff members, just trying to get like a definitive what was said, so that I can have an opinion on it. Because until I know what was said, it's hard to really say like, oh, it was out of line or it wasn't out of line. Who knows what it was. People who were there said it was battle bars. People who haven't heard it said it was more serious than that. And it seems like, on the North American side, people are getting upset about it. People in the UK are downplaying it. That's the sense that I have right now.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, where does this come from? Is there a history of dislike or of competition between those two leagues, between URL, between Don't Flop and King of the Dot? One of the things that is not in that quote that I read, but that has been referenced in several other... Oh, actually, it is there. Until he fires the guy who pulled that subscribe shit. So the question is, like, what is that subscribe shit? And I think this comes down to an anonymous accusation on RMBVA, which pointed out, I think legitimately, that if you look at Don't Flop's subscriber numbers over the course of the last 6 months or 3 months or whatever, you have on a bar graph a pretty steady new subscribers per day. I'm not going to quote any of the numbers, but it goes up and down. When they release a big battle, it spikes, and then goes back down to kind of like a normal subscribers per day. All of a sudden, over the course of 30 days, it jumps. It plateaus. It goes up, It stays up for 30 days, and then it goes back down to the initial numbers pre-bump.
And visually, it looks suspicious.
Yes, and this is something that I have double-checked personally. It's not something that I've only seen on RMBVA. I used the same tool that they used, and found those numbers myself. From what I can tell, it's not manipulated.
Yeah.
The thing is, whether or not, from those graphs, it seems to me as though there was some sort of manipulation in numbers. However, from what I can tell, again in kind of research, I can buy subscribers for any channel. I can buy them for my channel. I can buy them for your channel. I can buy them for Grind Time's channel.
Oh, really? You can just allocate them anywhere you want.
You just say, I'm paying this money. Here's the channel I want.
And what kind of... Do you have any idea of what kind of money this would take?
So again, this is very preliminary, but if... I think it's about $1,000 for 40,000 subscribers.
Which is a lot.
And which also seems to be about what that bump is equivalent to.
So is there a possibility, as crazy as this sounds, that someone spent $1,000 to try to smear Don't Flop?
I think that you have to leave that option open.
It seems a little crazy because like $1,000, I mean, frankly, there are a lot of people in the battle community that would do anything for $1,000. To spend $1,000 to like smear a league seems very strange.
Yeah,
but it's possible.
Yeah, and I mean, we're getting into like conspiracy territory here, but it's like that's a good investment for King of the Dot. If they see themselves as competition to Don't Flop, they set that up, they release an anonymous thing to smear them. Who the fuck knows what's going on in these like staff meetings?
Yeah.
Sure. Anything is possible. So I don't want to discount the fact that it's not like Drake buying $1,000 worth of subscribe. It could be anything.
Scandal of the century. Yeah. Drake spends $1,000 buying subs for Don't Flop.
Yeah. So anyhow, I think that is what what is referencing in the subscription.
Right. Yeah.
And
so clearly he pays attention to the forums, or someone close to him is telling him about stuff that's going on there.
And in that post, I think it was an anonymous post laying out the evidence, and then like people commenting here and there, whether it was
I briefly remember that at some point coming up. Yeah,
Kingfly jumps in saying it does look fishy to me, and then I believe Sam Graphics, who is the kind of like marketing branding dude at Don't Flop, jumps in and is like, we have a deal with, like, they're working at YouTube Studios to record stuff. They have a relationship with YouTube, basically denying everything.
Yeah,
why would we do this?
For sure.
When it's so easy to get caught, which again makes sense.
So if you get this sort of, not to get too far down the wormhole here, but if you get this sort of service to get a subscriber boost, does that boost your ad revenues for like what's the point? What's the point? Two, is it that bad a thing to be doing it? I don't know.
I think addressing number two first, it's dishonest, right? You're cheating the system, and as we've seen from Arcane Disaster, the fans don't like cheating. They don't like that kind of that perceived dishonesty, that perceived gaming of battle rap. And in terms of number one of like what do you gain out of it, I think you gain that reputation. So it's like, because I saw what during that time Don't Flop surpass King of the Dot in terms of subscribers, and then I can't remember if it was the Don't Flop channels that said it or staff or what, but there were definitely people, whether they be fans or what have you, on Twitter saying like, oh, this is a monumental day. Don't Flop passed King of the Dot and subscribers. Like, Don't Flop is the #1 league. Don't Flop is the next big thing. They've surpassed King of the Dot. So as I checked this yesterday, I think right now King of the Dot has about 1,000 more subscribers than Don't Flop. So this, the subscriber, I don't know if is boasting or just blah blah blah. Doesn't sound like it, but whether or not it was faked or done by them or whatever, it didn't work. They're still technically lower right now. They've been surpassed by King of the Dot on legitimate growth. Yeah. So anyhow, that's what the subscribe shit is over. In terms of like, there's been a few other like veiled threats from Organic and Kingfly. Kingfly was threatening to release some sort of screenshots about, what all the shit that has talked in the past. Organic initially was like, bad business ? Why don't we see whose business is really bad? And it's something about
some of screenshots,
more screenshots, and I don't know. I mean, screenshots go both ways, as we've seen from Arcane and Caustic.
Yeah.
That, if you release one set of screenshots, I'll release the other set, and then it goes back and forth, and then people start faking shit, and everything gets out of hand.
It's pretty easy to fake shit, yeah.
But I mean, who knows what is going on behind the scenes in Don't Flop, because my sources are limited on that side of things. But my sense is that a lot of North American, so you can say King of the Dot is Canada, but King of the Dot is now the West Coast as well, and like Lush has kind of dipped his foot in commenting. Aspect 1 has been a bit more aggressive. Bishop Brigante has said, congratulations, you've won 2 tickets to Blackout 4, like we'll see you in January. Kind of veiled threats. Kingfly has been more open about his dislike and dislike previous to.
But I think Kingfly as well, and I know you know him. He's always been, I guess, arguably the most vocal person in King of the Dot to critique other leagues. Is that right?
Definitely. And
he's the most active on the forum,
right?
Yeah,
and specifically Don't Flop, and specifically I'm trying to think of a case where he's badmouthed publicly URL, and
I think he's made maybe the occasional comment about them too. Yeah, but nothing that I can remember offhand. Is there any possibility here that this is all one big scheme to set up an organic match?
I doubt it.
Yeah, I doubt it too. I'm just bringing it up not to get too conspiracy theory, but I think. But I mean, obviously, people see this stuff and they're like, "Oh, they should face each other."
Right. D-Rex, Mad Ills, and then in one main event, and then the next night or in organic. Who would win that battle? You think?
Between Organic and
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's why it'll never.
Yeah, I mean, is a very, very good battler. Yeah. I mean, Organic was pretty good in his day too, but Ur's been, say, like, Organic's not been involved in battling for quite a while now.
I think his last battle was against Disaster.
Yeah. Was that in Grind Time?
Battle of the Debate 5 for that one.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah.
I mean, until this past weekend had not battled for. He battled since DNA? Maybe in Britain. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
But he's obviously been more recently active, and he's a very good freestyler.
Yeah, and what people were saying about this performance against Pesci and Bender, this 2-on-2 where he said this, is that he hasn't lost a step, that he's still one of the world's best performers.
Oh yeah.
But what that made me think of Dirtbag Dan at Battle of the Zay 2 against Roan, not doing all that well, stretching himself thin, admitting to that, and then doing poorly against Charlie Clips. Meanwhile, you've got putting on 5th birthday weekend, having argued like what has been referenced by many people as the performance of the event. So, however, burning bridges with Source and Daylight, it seems. So it's like, you see what I'm saying? Is like, Dirtbag Dan failed in the battles and put on a good event and, a tour in Japan. However, put on a great performance, and there have been, arguably slip-ups in the
But overall, I would say it was probably still a successful event, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Sounds
I think so too. Yeah.
We haven't seen any footage.
Yeah.
But...
Well, yeah, I've seen some footage.
Right. Okay.
But that's the thing, is that you've got. Did we already mention this on tape or off tape? But you've got, with no footage and no official account, beyond the Don't Flop Twitter account that was pretty vague in terms of like not quoting bars, just saying like, Clips O'Shea is very controversial, and then leaving it at that. And then meanwhile, you've got a few people who, arguably should not be the voice of the league, saying, here's what happened, here's exactly what happened, here's what, here's who won these battles, here's what went down behind the scenes. And I think that's kind of problematic. I can understand not wanting spoilers for your event because the footage is coming out, but when the footage is coming out, O'Shea Charlie Clips is coming out, in the schedule hasn't dropped, but not for another 3 weeks minimum.
Yeah.
6 weeks, 8 weeks. It could be, if it's farther down the card, there's so many good battles that are coming out that, the controversy over Clips and the beer on his shoes, because I've
kind of shoes was he wearing? Yeah, fucking alligator skin, like.
He stops the battle. O'Shea is rapping.
Yeah.
His boy, I heard someone say it was Locksmith from the UK. I don't know if it's true or not, but was jumping and reacting. Beer splashed out. O'Shea keeps going, and Clips kind of is like, that's not cool. Pauses the battle and is like, I forget exactly what he says, but is essentially not happy about it. And then O'Shea kind of takes it back and is like, stop crying about it, and gets back into it and gets the crowd back into it. But that's something that I'd heard about, and when I saw it, I was like, oh, it's not that big a deal. Likewise with the Pesci stuff, it's not a huge deal, but it's going to become a huge deal on Twitter. And I don't know, is that good for the league to have like these things blown out of proportion?
I would say no, and for the reason that like they blow out of proportion, and then you see it, and it's not a big thing, which you would think would be good, but then you're like, why did I even care about this? It's like you didn't control the message. You allowed me to bring it out of proportion because there's no pay-per-view or there's no like official account of things going on, and things are obviously going to seem a lot more serious than they are. Then when I do see them, it's like, big deal. Like, it's the type of thing with with performance. Like, if he's kind of smiling and laughing as he says these bars, it's a lot different than if he's looking straight in the camera and saying, suck my dick.
Right, for sure.
Right? And like, sneering at the camera or something like that. So I don't think that interleague rivalries, I don't think that's such a bad thing, actually. In fact, with Battle of the Bay 6, a lot of people were like, oh, this is kind of a KOTD versus URL event. And strangely, there was not, from what I've heard and from what I've seen so far, not a lot of URL bashing from the KOTD guys there. And it didn't devolve into that sort of situation.
I thought, I mean, that's an interesting point. And I thought that it was more of a style clash between URL style versus King of the Dot style.
Certainly with Big K Ilmac, right. It's like the prime example of the style clash.
But I think, you know, the closest it came to anything like anti-URL in that was references to Daylight and, you know, the Summer Madness fiasco with Smack and the footage and all that. So, yeah, I agree that interleague arguments and interleague beef is good, and it's especially good for the smaller league because it means that, because definitely like after World Dom, a lot of URL fans started paying attention to King of the Dot. You know, I'm sure a lot of guys who'd never heard of Sharon or who'd never watched a Sharon battle watched that DNA battle.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially when you have like someone like Hollow to Dawn, who's probably got like 45,000 Twitter followers being like, yo, this Sharon kid's nice.
Yeah.
Like, you've got a handful of guys like that being like, hey, this is a great battle.
Yeah.
You're going to bring in a lot of new fans.
Yeah.
And I think that Battle of the Bay 6 takes that to a different degree because you're bringing in a ton of like beloved guys from the East Coast sort of URL scene against a very strong contingent of Fresh Coast guys that maybe are not on the radar of some battle fans. And in a lot of ways, KOTD has really taken a lot of control, you know, in the North American scene as being sort of the premier league.
Yeah. And I think that's what was trying to do with this, but you know, at least in the weekend after, it kind of blew up in his face. That you know he's opened a can of worms, and all the you know, the predators jumped in and jumped on him without having heard anything other than organic or called out organic, and then everybody has to take a side. And you know, I think that it has potential to create rivalries between the battlers, but I think it's more important to create rivalries between the battlers in the leagues than the leagues themselves, because when you have a rivalry between the leagues themselves, then you get a freeze, because anyone from Don't Flop is afraid to go over to King of the Dot because the leagues are at war. But if it's like, you know, if it's Marlowe and Tricky P beefing and Sharon and Shuffle T, then that's great. But if it's Kingfly and then I think that's less productive in terms of creating the future of good battles.
So I'm wondering, it's difficult because there's an Atlantic Ocean between them. Maybe a Don't Flop versus KOTD on the Canary Islands or Bermuda. Like I'm trying to think of islands.
This is the time for the hot air balloon.
Battles.
But I don't know. I think it's problematic because, you know, Don't Flop. You know, I watch more Don't Flop than I watch URL, and it's always been the case. I've watched as much Don't Flop as I watch KOTD, I think, and you know, there seems to be a bit more of a marriage, obviously geographically, between American, Canadian, Fresh Coast, URL, you know, Toronto, everybody kind of coming together. And Don't Flop has a very vibrant, I'd say, mid-tier. You know, guys like C Major, guys like Cracker, Ognios, Marlowe, you know, Shelty, like all these guys are very, very strong battlers. And the thing is, like, unless, there's strong battlers in the UK, but they're not going to get, they're not flying Marlowe to Don't Flop, to URL or to the Fresh Coast, unless for maybe...
They're not going to do Marlowe to URL?
Yeah.
Fuck, that sucks.
But, they'll bring Disaster over. And they're not bringing a lot of guys over to URL, but, King of the Dot, it's like they're bringing the American guys because it's easier. They'll bring the UK guys for World Dom because that's the point of World Dom. So it means that the showcase of the really strong, like the talented UK guys, kind of remains in the UK or for people who are fans.
Yeah, they're kind of their own ecosystem.
Yeah, but trying to branch out, by calling out the right people. But
yeah, no, it's the whole thing is strange. Like it's tough to make a final judgment on this until we see what Ur's face looks like when he's saying this, because it really makes a world of difference.
Yeah.
And like if he's just sort of joking around about this, then it's like, it's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
And I think, at the end of the day, we're talking about battle rap, and like, it's maybe one of like the crassest venues of debate, like outside of some weird like white supremacist rally. Like it's one of the more socially acceptable ways of saying crazy shit outside of like extremist areas of gatherings. So it's not that strange for a battler or even a founder of a league to sort of cause a little bit of controversy. In a very subtle way, like URL tries to set itself apart from the other leagues as like we're the authentic league and the others aren't. Like they're not very combative about it, but it's like follow the originators, not the imitators, or whatever they say, right? Like
the only stage that matters.
Yeah, and like they go on and on about like how they're the only real league, and yet like Organic went to their event at Gnome 3 and seems to be fine with Smack and stuff like that, which is fine. That's okay.
And at the same thing, like you'll hear King of the Dot being like, "Oh, we have the best fans in the world." It's like.
And we've been to some events where the fans suck.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's not unheard of for the leagues to like big themselves up.
Yeah.
And those are kind of sneak disses to everybody else out there. And the way I see it, URL, King of the Dot, and Don't Flop are the top 3 battle leagues, English language battle leagues, and all of them. Yes. You can sort them in any way you want, depending on preference or depending on what criteria you're basing your top 3 in. So I don't know. I think that overall, I'd like to see more good battles. Ultimately,
cross-pollination.
Yeah, always more cross-pollination. Like I want to see the best battlers battle the best battlers.
Yeah.
I don't.
Do you not think that's happening enough already?
I do. I do, but I think that a guy like Ogmios should be battling international opponents and getting views for it.
Yeah.
And at this stage, I don't think he's had any.
I would say the cross-pollination is probably just bigger in North America, and a lot of that is just geographical, but part of it is also that KOTD has a pretty large reach, like between both coasts of the continent, right? And then another part of it is that there's just like these upstart leagues in North America that can get pretty decent guys on a card for the right price. Like, I think one of the bigger trends from battle rap for 2013 is that I don't think there is a tier system. Like, people talk about tiers a lot. He's top tier, he's upper mid tier and stuff like that. I don't think that exists. we're speaking in the next podcast about 100 Bullets and Endpost, for instance, right? We're talking about a guy who's an up-and-comer who's really only emerged this year versus 100 Bullets, who's been around for, 2 years now and is a much higher tier than the other guy. For the right price, they're the same tier.
Right.
And the price for one guy versus the other guy is different.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not a ton of money in battle rap, but like for the right price, guys will face each other and it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
And there are enough leagues around the world where like you get pretty random matchups, including Disaster facing a guy with 8 Twitter followers.
Right. In Australia.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. I was thinking about the tier system today, and I agree that your tier isn't necessarily based on the quality of your content, but it's on your popularity. So that like they will fly Disaster to Australia to battle anybody, to make a name for their league. And we saw Disaster last year. We've seen to some extent, JC league hopping this year, and it's like, I think though in terms of like if you're top tier, it's that your name rings out across the 3 top leagues. Everyone in Don't Flop knows Calico. Everyone in King of the Dot knows Calico. Whether he's battled in those 2 leagues doesn't matter. He's still like, he's a top tier. He's a big name. Everybody knows him. Ogmios is like top tier in terms of quality in the UK. Everybody loves him. He's one of their best guys right now. Fewer people know him in King of the Dot, and even no one knows him in URL,
exactly.
Right? So it's like if you like a guy like Clips, arguably a guy like guys like DNA and Cortez, if you're being flown around to be at every top tier league battle event, I think that makes you top tier.
Sure. Yeah.
If you can, if you're drawing new fans, if you're drawing drawing people to the venue, then that means you're like a big name. So anyhow.
I think some of it, like the unfortunate part for a lot of British battlers, is cost wise. Like it's a lot easier to bring in Cortez for a battle than a British battler. And the problem for the British battlers is that if they want to do international battles, they have to go across the Atlantic, and the only other option seems to be either like Norway or Sweden or one of those leagues, right?
And
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, whereas getting around North America, like there seem to be enough, established leagues or up and coming leagues that guys can kind of build their brands in a lot of different places and get paychecks different places. Whereas like, I mean, I guess England kind of is on an island, but like, it really is in the battle world kind of really is an island.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot tougher to get those guys to different types of battles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that, in the past, King of the Dot has given an open invitation to many British battlers saying, if you can come out here, then we'll give you a battle. We'll, I don't know the extent of the contracts, but like, Pedro, when he came out for World Dom to battle Impose, had a sponsor that seemed to have flown him out for that battle. And then the other guys were Definition and Youth Oracle.
Definition's, he's been at every single one.
And he's arguably like one of the top tier British battle rapper in that he's him, O'Shea, Tony D for the wrong reasons. Since like all the guys who came over for the first few World Doms, like Kruger, those are the big names in King of the Dot and Don't Flop. But I think the current roster is big in the UK, not quite big in North America. Yeah. And it's the funny thing, it's like this kind of Catch 22, thank you. That it's like you're not a big name until you've done a few battles. Like you're not a big name in King of the Dot until you've come over from the UK and done a few battles well in King of the Dot. However, there's no reason to come over until you're a big name.
Right.
So, Youth Oracle came over, the crowd didn't like him.
Is that battle dropped?
It hasn't dropped yet. Right?
Wow.
Yeah, it was I think that and Tantrum Protege were the two, that and then also Pigsty Jinai, which had the audio issues.
Yeah.
Are the three, I don't know what order, but they're the three last battles to drop.
For a reason.
Yeah, because they weren't great battles.
Yeah, and they're going to get overshadowed by the new releases that are really great.
Right.
It's just kind of like we're sneaking these ones in right now.
Right. Yeah. And, coming out alongside the Battle of the Bay stuff, 3 or 4 days later.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's this kind of and then if you're a guy like Marlowe or Shuffle T, looking, how were they received? I'm sure Youth Oracle came back and was like, it wasn't a great battle. So it's like, why would I spend money to fly across the Atlantic to perform in front of a hostile crowd when I can put on a classic battle on a platform in my hometown that loves me and that will arguably get the same exposure locally, and if it's good enough, internationally.
Yeah, absolutely. My only exception that I can think of to that is Shoddy did really well against Fingas, and that kind of helped build him up, and he just skyrocketed from there.
Yeah. Do you like Shoddy?
I do when he's not choking,
right.
or when
so
he's when he's not trying to freestyle himself out of a mess.
Yeah.
When he's on though, his flow is tremendous, and he actually seems like one of the only guys from battle rap that could get famous.
Yeah, and
he didn't Deadmau5 or whatever that guy fly him out to Toronto to record some tracks because he apparently he's a big battle fan, that guy.
Yeah,
which is
it was on the on the heels of one tweet about Deadmau5 saying, "I love this Arsenal Shoddy battle."
Yeah,
yeah. So I agree. Shoddy seems to have Shoddy did it perfectly. Same Lunar Sea. A few battles that went really, really well, and launched a career out of it. And I think that that there's the advantage of being on that, what you were talking about before, being on that island of DNA can release a track, and then 100 other battle MCs will release a track the same week. Yeah. Everybody's jockeying for a position. Whereas Lunar Sea or Shoddy Horror, they're the two of the biggest names in battle rap who have moved on to legitimate rap. And I haven't checked the views, but from the buzz that Shoddy and that their last tracks have gotten, it feels like they've springboarded into.
Speaking of islands, 360 is pretty big.
Yeah, in Australia.
Yeah.
And nowhere else. So it's
No, but he's isn't he on tour with opening for Eminem and some other people?
Yeah.
Someone on RMBVA will always post hey, 360's on some crazy tour.
In Australia? Or
I don't know what the tour is, but he's landed some pretty good opening gigs for people. And,
I think he's platinum in Australia or something crazy.
Yeah, and he's wins awards there and stuff. He's, I don't know what the equivalent would be, because it's
Mad Child.
Mad Child, I guess.
Yeah. It has that same kind of Canada-centric success, national success without international success.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anything else to say? I think that's...
I don't know. I think we probably covered it for the most part. Keep in mind that I haven't seen the footage. Have you seen any bootleg footage of any of this?
I have seen some bootleg footage, but none of
Okay, so most of what we're talking about is and we're going on various accounts that we're seeing. Keep in mind that we're not trying to get heavily biased with this. as I've said, could have been saying these lines kind of joking around and laughing, or he could have been very much like, fuck KOTD.
Right.
We don't know which one at this point. Yeah. It seemed like a peculiar, strange move from him, but we can't fully judge it until we actually see this battle drop.
Two more things that I want to mention. Sorry, I should have brought this up way earlier. That in the wake of the, of these bars, Thesaurus, who seemed to be already upset at for issues at customs and being unable to get into the country to battle Archaic for this event, mentioned that had hit him up, I believe in February, to start a Don't Flop Fresh Coast League. And I think that, it's that kind of thing going back almost a year, those kind of like behind the scenes moves that I think are more motivated in terms of the reaction of, King Fly and these guys that have seen these, who might know of these things or who have just heard of these things for the first time, and then they realize that there's much more animosity behind the scenes than the fans are aware of.
It seems very seems like such a strange move for Don't Flop to consider a Fresh Coast League. You know what I mean? Like, I guess there's not a huge relationship between Toronto and California, but at least it's still the same land mass. Like, it's still the same continent. Like, Don't Flop is so far away from California that, like, you wonder about how they would run such a thing. Like, why would it be of interest to them?
Well, I mean, just thinking of where everything was in February, that's at least 3 or 4 events ago on the Fresh Coast. So it's before King of the Dot had established themselves. So at the beginning of this year, there was a bit of, there was a vacuum on the West Coast in terms of talent. So, maybe it was like almost like a race to the North Pole kind of thing, but a race to the Fresh Coast on who could establish themselves out there first to build their brand, to like make connections with the defunct scene out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's still several, like, if it's February, we're still talking like more than a half a year after the cannabis event, right? Which was, aside from that, like, pretty huge, big event. So it had not totally like coalesced into something great yet with the Fresh Coast scene, but it had KOTD already like had laid the foundation, I think, which makes it kind of strange. Like, I think it was already on its way to becoming great. I'm not really sure. It seems like Don't Flop at that point would have been already too late.
Yeah. So that's one thing to mention. And then another thing that caught my attention on their announcement that Daylight and
Calcium Kid?
That Daylight and Thesaurus weren't making it in. They released a statement on Facebook saying, we respect our fans too much to drop this on you the day of the event, which is what King of the Dot tends to do when they have no shows, is they wait until the night of.
It's a little
with the Holohan no show against Clips was like a heavily guarded secret.
But how far in advance did they actually know?
I don't know. I still don't know the answer to that.
Because it seemed like there were certainly rumors about that one that, Holohan had gotten in trouble the night before the battle.
Right. Yeah.
So in that case, it's like, that makes sense why you would only find out the day of, because for the people organizing it, they may have only found out that day or very late the previous night.
But Caustic Cheddar Cheese, that was like an announcement when we were expecting that battle to happen. They announced
we just kind of noticed all of a sudden, like, what the hell?
Yeah. Likewise, Looney Thesaurus. Looney, there was always...
There were kind of rumblings about that one. But, there does seem to be always if you go to a battle event, you know, especially with a lot of out-of-towners coming in, you can expect 1 or 2 battles to not happen. And a lot of the time, it's a surprise, I would say.
Yeah.
So it does seem sort of like a veiled criticism of KOTD's policy on this.
Not only that, and this is where it gets a lot less veiled. They say, like, to the dismay of thousands and the delight of a few, we have to announce that Daylight and Thesaurus didn't make it on the border. And it's like, it's that kind of language, like, you know, who knows who they're
Well, I thought they meant to the delight of few as in, I thought they said to the delight of the few at the border. Like to the delight of the border agents who are dickheads or something like that.
It could be that.
I could be wrong too.
Yeah.
They could be saying, like, to the delight of, you know, the
way
KOTD staff.
Yeah,
but
that's how I read it. But, you know, maybe I'm looking for... Anyway, it just... I even...
No, I mean, at the very least, that, like, we respect our fans too much to keep this from them is, I would say, probably a bit of a shot at KOTD.
Yeah. So anyhow, so there's that. So there's these little, like, digs back and forth. Another one that I noticed was Don't Flop on Facebook had said, it's like, oh, you know, we're only a few hundred away from 40,000 followers on or likes on Facebook. So, like, tell your friends. And then, like, an hour later, King of the Dot's like, hey, we're only, like, 800 likes away from having 50,000 fans. Go tell your friends. So it was like, you see these digs back and forth that, you know, anyone who's paying close attention to both of those leagues, there's a bit of a kind of spitting contest between them. So I don't know. It's hard to know how deep it goes, how much, you know, there's definitely been...
Maybe they're competing with each other because, like, URL will not be competing with them. Like, I don't think Smack really, like... he doesn't seem like a guy to me that would be going on any forums to see what people think of his battles. Whereas each league clearly has people on staff who do. Like, they care about these metrics and, like, different benchmarks to hit.
Right.
Whereas I don't think Smack really gives a fuck.
No. Yeah.
Maybe that's why they compete over these things.
Yeah, I think that's fair. You know, I think that Smack, because URL subscribers are, I think it's like King of the Dot and Don't Flop have about 180,000. URL has in the millions, I think.
Really?
Yeah, let's double check that right now.
I mean, either way, their battles typically get considerably more hits, and they've got certainly more traction.
So as of not in the millions at all. King of the Dot has 180,726. Don't Flop has 179,635. Ultimate Rap League has 259,287.
I mean, maybe it's simply because King of the Dot and Don't Flop, King of the Dot at World Domination was basically celebrating its 5th birthday. Don't Flop's 5th birthday is only 3 months after, so they're very close in subscribers. Like, for each other, they're kind of like a measuring stick on, you know, the other person or something like that, right? Like, they view each other as sort of like the benchmark to get over. Whereas, like, Smack goes back to, like, you know,
a DVD or
all these weird, like, mixtapes, like almost like And One mixtapes and stuff like that. Like, it's kind of like they're competing in a different sphere, except that they're not, because it's still battle rap. But, like, they're a different thing, and they've been around longer, and they've got, in a way, a different audience. You know, whereas I think a KOTD and Don't Flop audience is maybe more similar to each other than...
Right. They can, like...
Yeah.
They can take... they probably share more fans.
They're more natural competitors, I would say. Than
URL
certainly Don't Flop in URL or King of the Dot and Don't Flop.
Yeah. Agreed. Cool. Well, let's end it there because I just noticed that B Magic versus DNA just dropped with no warning.
No warning.
So let's go watch that. We'll end it there. Thanks for listening. This is Chris.
That's Matt.
That's Matt over there. And yeah, let us know what you think. Let us know if we were super biased towards King of the Dot, as everyone will claim we are in the UK, I think. Yeah, hope you're well. TO Battle Blog on Facebook, on Twitter, on the web, on YouTube even. Check us out, and yeah, take care.